Right then, good afternoon, here we are. We're going to have a go at Puffin. Now, please excuse any background noise if you can. We have got building works going on at the moment across the road. They're building some new houses. So, on this first video, I'm going to go into a lot of what I did with the background, where the image is from, and some of the colours that I've chosen, and the process in which we'll be working. So this is the photograph. Now you will get a reference image and you will get an outline if you need it, or if you want you can draw your own. You can use trace down. There are several ways of getting this image onto your watercolour paper. Because I've been using a block, I've drawn it in freehand. So you know, it's entirely up to you. You can do it on loose sheets of paper, which you fasten down to a board with masking tape. But before you do that, you can use a light box if you require, or, as I say, drawing freehand is good practice. But if you don't feel confident enough, a light box or some trace down paper. The thing with trace down paper, I find that it does leave quite smudgy marks, so that is why I sort of started doing freehand drawing, and sometimes occasionally I will use a light box, but the choice is entirely yours. So this puffin's got some sand eels, which is one of its favourite foods. I have been down myself. I've got quite a few photographs of my own referencing. They just need editing. They were taken at Bempton Cliffs on the east coast. Now, this particular reference, I picked this one because I did this one a few years ago, but I did it in acrylic paints, which is not my favourite medium. So this time I thought we'll give it a go in watercolour, but I thought it was just a little bit more interesting than just having the bird, having the sand eels as well. So the first thing I approached was the background. Now this is a plain blue background. I wanted a little bit of texture in there. So, I don't know if any of you have seen the willow tipped tutorial that I've done on the colour pencil section, but if you look at that one, it's got a watercolour background. And so what I did initially was draw in the outline, just the outline. I didn't put any of this detail in, and then I went round and I masked off the bird. So that's why I didn't put the detail in to start with, because the masking fluid could have pulled it off, or you know, you wouldn't have seen it, you've had to redraw it. So I masked off the inside of the bird. It's come over a bit there. And then what I did was I did a wet on wet process, which is where you wet the paper. So you can use either a sponge or you could use a brush. When I'm using a larger area, I use one of these sort of quill brushes. And I find them really good. They don't look very big, but they are very good at putting large amounts of water on so that you can carry on working. It keeps it wet enough. For the masking fluid, to apply the masking fluid, I use a blue one. It's called drawing gum, but you can use, there's all sorts of varieties on the market. And then in this little jam tub here, which was sterilised, cleaned out and sterilised, what I did was I've actually put some shavings of some soap in there, and then with a little bit of water, and you put your brush in there, you can get some soap on your brush. So instead of having a big bar of soap about, it's nice just to have it in this nice little handy pot, so that'll last a long time. And by putting a bit of soap on the brush before you use the masking fluid, it does protect your brush, and then give your brush a good wash out. But always use an old brush for masking fluid, because masking fluid can destroy your brushes, so it does need a good clean out. But this one's been going for quite some time now, so I keep that especially for the masking fluid, and the soap helps protect it. So you wet the paper. I used some ultramarine blues, and then I put a little bit of grey just in these dark, down at the bottom, these corners here, and I put a little bit up at the top as well, just to create a little bit of difference in colours. So as you can see, so I wet it, put these colours on, and then what I did, I have a couple of magnets, a different size magnets. You could use coins, anything that's round shaped, that's quite, you know, decent. So I used two different sizes there, and all I did was put them inside a piece of tissue, so, or kitchen roll should I say. So there's my kitchen roll, and what I do is I just put them inside the kitchen roll like that, and then pull the kitchen roll up, twist it around, and there you are, you have more or less a stamp. So when the paint is wet and you've got your colour on, so get these ready and just put them to one side. Now I've used 2 different size circles just to create a little bit of interest. Wet the paper, put the paint on, and then while it's still sort of wet, let it dry a little bit. Don't use it, you don't want to do it straight onto really soaking wet paper because you'll lose the colours. So obviously up this end of the paper it's a lot lighter and it's more ultramarine. Down here it's a lot darker. And then what you do is you just stamp it like that. So I have 2 or 3 this size and 2 or 3 of the smaller sizes, because obviously the more you stamp it, you're lifting paint off. And then what that creates is this sort of bokeh background. So it looks like it's in the distance and it's quite smudgy, but it gives it a nice effect. And then we can paint the bird, and the bird should pop out on the paper. Okay, so that's the background. You let that dry. I did this last night, let it dry overnight, so it's nice and dry now. Let me just take this out. Okay, so then the next bit is to work out what we're going to do. So if you all know me, what I do, whether I'm doing a colour pencil piece of work, which is an animal or bird, or I'm doing a watercolour, I always start with the eyes. So I took the masking fluid off once the background was thoroughly dried, and then I've put in some detail. So I've drawn in freehand some detail. So let me just sort of zoom in a little bit. So you can see there I've drawn in some of these sand eels roughly. I've put in the markings for the beak. This is the head, the top of the head, which is dark. This bit here is a light colour white, but white's not white. We've got all of the bits of greys and that in there. And then this is the eye here, so we'll start with the eye. And then we've got the body, which is dark, and then a little bit of white at the end of the body there. Okay, so we've got the drawing, we've done the background. So the next stage is I'm going to look at some colour. So I've been, so that's the picture. So I've looked around roughly and seen what sort of colours we need. Some of the sand eels I'll sort of look at later, but we may need a few other colours, but we shouldn't need many others. So the colours that I've come up with, the basic colours that I'm going to be using are on here. So I've done some samples. So we can vary these colours by, this is like a red, it's done mainly for the eye, it's a bit darker. So when we come to the beak, we can lighten that off, or we can add some yellows in it. But this one's made up of a Windsor red, transparent orange and a permanent rose. So just mix it until, you can put it against the eye and make sure you've got the right colour. But if you haven't got these particular paints, I use Winsor & Newton Professional. If you don't have these colours, then, or if you've got the Cotman colours, just use the nearest. So you could use cadmium red, you could use a cadmium yellow, and they do a permanent rose in that as well. So you could do those, okay? And then I've got here like a grey blue, so like a lightish grey. So for that I've used a lamp black and ultramarine blue. But the main way that I mix my greys and my blues is this. So I use a base which is quite dark. If you mix it in equal quantities and you mix it up quite thick, using ultramarine and burnt sienna, you get a nice sort of black, but it's not a flat black. If you use black tube paint, you'll find that it would go rather flat and look quite boring. So I do that, but then what I can do, using the two colours, if I want it to be a cooler grey, so in other words, on the cooler spectrum of the colours, then what I do is I add a little bit more blue in than I do the burnt sienna. And by doing that, you can create, and if you do it by the different amounts, so by adding more and more blue, it goes towards a bluer, the bluer range on the spectrum, but you get a cool grey. And then again, you can water that down, or you can make it a little bit thicker, or just keep layering. And then for the warmer browns, all you do is the opposite. You use the ultramarine blue and burnt sienna, but you add more burnt sienna than you do the blue. And then this way you get a grey, but it's a warmer grey. And again, by adding more of the burnt sienna or adding less of the blue, whichever way you want to look at it, you can create the different colours. So that's how I get my greys and my sort of black, natural black. But for this one, I wanted it to look more like a blue, a definite bluey grey. You could use Payne's grey if you wanted. I'm not a big fan of it, but if you wanted to use Payne's grey, you could do. That's the burnt sienna and ultramarine coming out as black, so that was mixed quite well. As I say, this is the beak, the eye colour, but I will lighten it for the beak, and I'll show you how we do that as we go along. For that, I've got a Windsor red, transparent orange and permanent rose, but you could replace that with a cadmium red, cadmium orange, or just a plain orange, and then permanent rose. We've got burnt umber, which is in the eye, in the iris of the eye, and then I've got an Indian yellow, because I'll be using that to use on this little bit of the round here, and there's some yellows around here. But I also use it as a base layer for the eye as well. If you use yellow when you're doing animals, it does sort of come out. I used to use a lemon yellow, but I found that the Indian yellow is, just as good. But if the animal's eye or the bird's eye is quite bright yellow, then yes, I will do a lemon yellow underneath. So they're the colours. Now the image I've got is by Amanda West, and you can find it on a website called Flick with an R on the end, Flickr. So Mandy West is a very good photographer. She does a lot of animals, but predominantly birds, and she has got some beautiful photography pieces on there, so I recommend you take a good look at them. Another place you can look for images is Pixabay Free Imaging. There's no licensing there, no copyright, and also you could look on Unsplash. But if you're going to look at images, I would be very careful if you go into Google and just put in, say, Puffin and then images and get all these images up, because even though they're on there on Google, you need to check because they could be copyrighted. So you do have to be careful when it comes to referencing photos. Okay. I will always put where I've got the reference photo from and recognise either the photographer, or if it's my own photography, which I started using a lot more lately. So when I do my own photography, then I will let you know, but I will allow you to use my photography for doing your own images as well. Okay, so as you look around, you can see we've got some dark colours on here. But again, like I said, black isn't black. It's got light colours and dark. So it's got some cooler colours here at the top of the head. And then they come down and they get a little bit warmer. And then on the back of the neck here, that side there cooler. And then this side they're a little bit warmer. We've got sort of a warmy browny grey underneath his chin. And then here on the white side, we've got a little bit of colour here, which is reflecting the red off the eye and off the beak as well. And then also we've got some greys down here, shadows, which are warmish looking. And then we've got some yellow bits here on the beak, and then it's an orangey red on the beak. They are a very colourful bird. And if you haven't seen one, when you see them for the first time, a lot of people are a bit surprised because they're a lot smaller than what people think. They're a fascinating bird, and we get quite a lot of them at Bempton and round Flamborough, so I have got quite a lot of photographs of the puffins. I find them a fascinating little bird. Also, we have a lot of birds come in the garden, so you will see me do a lot of birds. We have quite a few visitors to our garden, things like starlings, we have goldfinch, we've had chaffinch. We've got the great tit and the blue tit. We've also got the pesky crows and pigeons. We've also got a couple of magpies that keep coming. We have robins that come, and you know, quite a lot of blackbirds as well, which are ground feeders. So we do have a lot of birds come in our garden. So I do have quite a lot of, I have a camera set up permanently sort of inside the house that looks out into the garden, and I can get some really good photos of the birds. So we're going to have a go at this one, the Puffin. I picked him because he's colourful, he's cheerful, and obviously with the bad weather we've been having so far this year, I thought a little bit of cheering up was in order. So once you've done the background, right, we're going to start first with the eye. So I'll put my reference photograph on one side. I'm just moving my paint palette out of the way. That's one of my palettes. So I tend to put the colours up here, and then I put them with the water here. If I want to, I can put some paint on here, on the top there. So I can put the paint on there, I put some water at the bottom, and then I can pull it the right amount of water that I need. So I find these palettes quite useful. Okay. So I'm just going to put them over there. I'm going to put my reference photograph here. I'll show you some of the brushes that I use. So I've got my photograph next to it. I've also got a spare bit of paper here, just to rest my hands on that, so you don't get any oils out of your hand onto the work that you're working on. Put this, oops, is it a bit too bright with that on? No, that's fine. As I say, I do apologise for the noise outside. So some more of the brushes. So I've shown you the sort of mop brush that I use, the quill brush, and I've shown you the masking brush. Now, if I want to lift some highlights out by using a damp brush and then sort of gently manipulating the paint and then using a paper towel to lift out, I have an eradicator brush which is like this. It's only a very small one. So it's fantastic for this size painting if you need to get in and get some highlights out. The majority of the time I use, when I'm doing work so small, I like to use, I've got this is a Sable, Winsor & Newton Sable. I've got the 00, but you can use, I never say to somebody, right, use this size brush. I've got a Rosemary & Co. Kolinsky Sable there, size 1. There. And I've also got a 0, which is a Rosemary & Co. Series 301 there. I may go up to a 2 as well, which I have here. Yep, that's a Rosemary & Co. size 2, and it's the same series. It's up to you personally how you handle the brush on the paper and the size of your work that you're going to be doing as to what brush you need. But it needs to be comfortable, and it needs to be so you can get all the detail in the area that you're going to be doing. Okay, so let's start with this eye. So what I'm going to do to start with, I've got some, you can use either a putty rubber or glue tack, whatever. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lift some of this pencil out, because if some of the pencil gets in with the watercolour, one, you can't rub it out afterwards, and two, it can muddy your paints a little bit. So you can probably see there, let me zoom in a little bit now. Oops, I don't want to go in too much. There we go. So this is what we're doing, which is the eye. So you can see how small it is against my finger. So we're going to be doing a small area. So I've got my protective paper there, and I've just gently erased some of that pencil mark so it doesn't stand out as much as this. So as we go along, I will be lightening some of the areas. So the first thing we need to do is get a base layer down. I also have an air dryer for drying in between. And the paper that I'm using today, I'm using a block, and it's the Saunders and Waterford, and it's a knot. I usually use, my favourite paper is Fabriano Artistico, and it's the 300 gram, or if I'm doing a commission, I obviously go up to the 640 gram paper. This is a 12 by 9, and it's a block, so it's sealed all the way around here where this black is. So So that's where it's all sealed all the way around, and there's just one small section that's left, so I can pull it off at the end. So it's like having a stretched piece of paper. But if you're using a loose paper and you're using about a 300 GSM and you're going to be doing a lot of wet on wet, then I do suggest that you stretch your paper. Now I will be uploading a video on how to stretch paper, because I do stretch it if I'm doing a commission. Okay, so let's have a look. So this is what we're going to start with. We're going to start with the eye. We've got a little bit of something there that looks a bit like a pebble, and some more grey down here, and then we have the red section around it. So we're going to start with this eye first, the centre. Okay, I'll just pull it out a little bit more, because obviously I don't want it, that's it. Okie dokie, so at first we're concerned with this bit here. And I'm going to go inside. I'm just going to go on the inside here. We've got two lighter areas right on the outside, so I'm not going to wet those, but I'm going to start by wetting the eye, or dampening the eye, but not soaking it. And then I'm going to use a little bit of the Indian yellow mix. Okay, so we're going to mix a little bit of the Indian yellow. So fairly watery. Now I do have a separate mixing brush, which is it's actually a Billy Shoal mixer, and I've had it for quite a long time, and it's a very good brush for using for mixing. And you shouldn't use your proper brushes for mixing. Okay, so 2 pots of water, one mucky and one clean. Okay, so they're up there, and got a nice bit of towel there to dampen, to dry my brushes on. Okay, so some clean water. Make sure you don't have any of these nasty little dribbles on the end of your quill there, look, on your, there we go. Take that off there. Okay, so I put the water in the centre where I'm going to be, and then I'll work it out to the outer edge. And as I say, I'm not touching I'm covering the iris and the pupil, but I'm leaving the 2 lighter areas on the outer part of the eye. So keep looking. I can't say it enough. Keep looking at your reference photo, because you want to paint what you see, not what you think you see. Okay, so that's there. And then I'm going to pick up some of this Indian yellow, and I'm using at the moment, I'm using the size 0. I'll see how I get on with this one first. So I'll tap the colour in, and then I'm just going to move it around so it covers the iris. Okay, the iris and the pupil, but leaving these 2 smaller areas on the outside. Okay. So that's just a base layer. The eyes are dark, but they also have, if you look really closely at the eye, so if I fetch this up here, you can see it's got some browns under here, but they've got a sort of a warm tinge to them, tint. So the yellow, when we put the burnt on umber on the iris bit, that the Indian yellow will come through it a little bit and add that little bit of warmth. And then at the top we've got this highlight, which we're going to pull out at the end. Okay, so the base layer is the Indian yellow. I do use base layers on all that I do, because by putting a base layer on and then working on top of it, you can create some very nice shadows, also some softer areas, some darker areas going into lighter areas, and you can work on top of a base layer, so you get some of the base layer coming through on the top layer, on the detailed layer. Okay, so we're just letting that dry. You can use a hairdryer if you want, but be very careful when using a hairdryer, because if you're holding it too close to the picture, then and the picture is wet, it's going to move the paint all over your painting, which you don't want. So hold it at a decent distance above, and it's just to sort of flash dry it off. If you can, I do recommend that you let them dry naturally. Okay, when your paper's wet, when you tilt it, you'll see it has a little sheen on it. This has lost its sheen, so that means it's nearly dry. But because we're working in such a small area, it will dry off fairly quickly. So the next bit that we're going to do is I'm going to put in some of the burnt umber. But before that, I'm just going to put in a bit of the... I'm just going to sort of dampen the outer side of the eye, of the iris. So I'm just going to go around this area so you can see the shine there. So I'm just pulling it around just on the edge. That. And then I'm going to get some of the burnt umber. Where's my palette? So where's my burnt umber? Is there. Okay, so I've got some of this burnt umber, yeah. So I'm not going to do it very dark to start with. And then what I'm going to do is I'm looking, and the sort of brown, the browny colour is sort of, it's around this side here, underneath the pupil, and it comes up here. Okay. And as I say, that yellow is coming through and it's giving it that bit of a warm glow. Okay, now I've left that top bit there because it's sort of a bluey grey colour up there. So I'm trying to keep, I don't want to mix the tones up too much. So I'm actually going to go down just because we're working in a very small area. I'm going to use the 00. So what I can see from this picture is this bit is the highlight at the top, and we've got some dark here. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to go around, outline the outside of the iris and put the pupil in with the black. Now, as I say, with black, my preferred method is using, so I've got here, I've got some ultramarine blue and I've put some burnt sienna in, and then if you mix it up at different levels, there we go. So that's sort of half and half. So it's so what I'm going to do is I'm just literally just outlining very gently, hardly touching the paper, looking at my image. So it comes down here. Okay, and then this is the pupil. Now I could wet it, but I don't want it ending up all the colours mushing together. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put the pupil in. And then I'm just going to, with a damp brush, put some more on that outside so it comes round here. And there is a bit of a dark line around this top area here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clean the brush, and then with a take all the water off the ferrule. You haven't got any water dripping off this ferrule. And then what you do is on the inside you just sort of go over the line, soften it in. So if you look there, it's now turning that top bit into a nice sort of, it's gone over the yellow and it's gone into bit of a grey colour. So, and then around here, softening that up as well. And then I'm going to soften this area. Okay. So it's still quite damp. So while it's still damp, I'm just going to add a little bit more in the centre of this pupil and pull it out a little bit. And also around this bottom area. And then I'm also going to put in some more of the burnt umber. Okay, so, and I'm tapping it in because I want to leave some of the lighter areas. Okay, and then that'll go into that. And because I've used, in the pupil, I've used the ultramarine as well as, you know, burnt sienna, you could use burnt umber, then, you know, the colours do sort of belong to each other. So now I'm just going to darken, just before it dries completely, I am going to darken. So with the French ultramarine and burnt sienna, I want to get this darker edge in first. Okay, so it comes down here. Okay, around here. You can see some of it here, and then just soften it in, tap it and soften it in a little bit into those ultramarine colours, and just darken up that pupil again there. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the grey that I said, but what I've done is I've watered it down and I've put in a little bit more blue than the burnt sienna, so it's a bit more bluey, so it's a cooler grey. Watered it down, tap on the brush, and then this top section I'm just going to actually tap it in. Okay, and then what we're going to do is lift out some highlight in a sec. There. Okay, so I've got to let this dry first, so it shouldn't take long, as I say, so I'm just going to get off that water, get the water droplets off my ferrule. So, and then just tap in a little bit more of this dark colour around the edge and in the middle. That's it. There we go. And then just put in some that. Yeah, so just give that a couple of minutes to dry. And while I'm doing that, while I'm waiting for that to dry, well, I've got the very dark, so my version of black, which is the mixed up, two colours mixed up. If you look at the edge where we've got some of these highlights coming round, we have got an outline on there. So I'm just literally painting the highlight in at the edge around the outer side of the eye. The brush is a bit dry, so all the paint is, so I'm just gonna, that's it. And this I'm using the 00 brush because I just want a very fine line sort of coming around. Around here and around that bit there. Okay, so now the iris should be drying. Okay. Okay, so that's round there. So now you can see where the two highlighted areas are going to be there. What I'm going to do with those, I'm just doing a very watered down ultramarine. So I'm going to put a very watery ultramarine inside, just tapping it in. That's it. And on this side, like that as well. There we go. Right. Just now going to put in a bit more. Just want to. Make sure I've got all these edges tidied. Okay. And it comes down there. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to lift some of these highlights out. Just going to darken that a little bit, so just a little bit too light. Okay, and then we're going to lift some highlights out in a sec. So while we're waiting for them to dry and then lift the highlights out, what we can do is we might as well move on, so I can leave that to dry naturally. What we're going to do is we're going to move on, so I'm going back to the 0 and I'm going to wet this section here and this section here, and then we're going to put some grey on there. Okay, so I'm going to wet that area. Now this grey is quite a cool grey, so it's going to have more blue in it than it is burnt sienna. Okay. I'm just going to tap round with the colour. I'll put it in the middle and then tap it and pull it round, because this way you prevent getting a edge round it. Because if you sort of go around the outside and then put the rest in the inside, you end up with quite a dark edge sort of outlining the shape, which you don't always want. So if you tap it in the middle and then pull it out to the edge, you should get a more even coverage. So I'm just looking at the shape, make sure I get the shape right. Okay, that's that one. And then I'm just going to do the same with this bottom section here. So I'm going to wet it. So you can see where I'm putting the water because it's glistening in the camera. Okay. And then I'm just going to pick up some of this lighter grey. Again, dab it in the middle. And then just pull it out around that shape. So give it a nice edge, but without it being like a marked edge. Okay, so you can see as that's dried there, it's quite, you know, there's not really a defining edge around it. I mean, it's got a sharp edge, but it's not really dark around the outside and light on the inside, which you can get if you put it on wrong. So we're just going to leave that to dry for a minute. Now these top bits should have dried, so I'm going to get my eradicator and a little bit of kitchen roll. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to dampen my eradicator. Don't want to be soaking, just damp. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just looking around this eye, and there's certain bits here at the bottom and this side here that are a little bit lighter, so I'm just touching it, the eradicator. And then what I do is put the tissue on, press and lift, and you can see it's lifting some of these areas here. So they don't want to be uniform, they want to be sort of random, and at the same time soften that bottom edge into it. Lift there. Okay, so now I'm looking at this highlight on the top, and what we've got is we've got sort of a line that comes down here and then goes up that way that. And then there's a line slightly coming across that way. So I just tap it. There we go. And what we can do is, if we've pulled a bit too much out, so like the centre there, the pupil, I want to darken that up and into there. Like that, and pull it down. And then that top bit there is quite dark. And this bit down here. Okay. And there's actually a little piece there that's a little bit darker. There we go. Now I could, what I might do, I'll obviously see how it dries. I could actually put in some white, but I'd try not to use the gouache or the white because I just don't think it looks authentic. So I'm just sort of pulling a bit of the light round there. So that's the highlight that sort of comes round, showing that the eye is a perfect round. Okay, so just tidying that up a little bit now. Okay. And you can see we've got this nice sort of brown warm tone at the bottom. And then we've got, you can see where the pupil is, okay? So what I'm going to do now that's drying, I'm going to go back here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to soften with some water. I'm going to soak it all, and then I'm going to pick up that same colour as we did originally, but now this time I'm looking at where the shadows are. So if you look, it's a little bit dried up the paint a little bit. There we go. Okay, and then so I'm putting on, and I go tapping it, and then looking where the shadows are. So it's quite shadowy underneath there, and then goes up there, and then just clean brush, tap it so it's smoother on the inside, and then I need it a little bit darker but still blue, so just take the water off the ferrule. So underneath here it is quite dark, so that comes up there like that, and then here at the top we've got a dark piece here that actually comes off into the white area. These are going to be white feathers, so you sort of want this a bit jaggedy. Okay, and then it gets a little bit narrower up there. Okay, and then just clear your brush, and then a damp brush, not a wet brush, and then soften from the inside and pull it in like that, so it just nicely softens, and then we'll pull a bit of an highlight out in a bit. So pull that out there a little bit more. So it goes up there a little bit. Oops. So it's like that, and then again just dabbing in on this bottom bit there. Okay, and then soften that away there, and then we'll pull the highlight out in a second. So now looking at the bottom, now the bottom section is quite a lot darker than this top section. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to wet it all. I'm just going to use this brush, and I'm just going to tap in. Oh, I'll use the bigger brush. It's too small, is that one for me? So I've got some of the darker blue, bluey grey, and then tap it in. Because it has got some lighter areas coming out of it as well. So I'm just going to tap in and then soften and pull it all together. So you've got some lighter areas and some darker areas there. Make sure it's in line with there. And there. Okay. Soften that in again. So that is now quite a lot darker than that top area. I will probably darken it that little bit more. It's mostly this end where it's dark and underneath. There we go. And then, there we go. There. Okay, so again, I'm going to use my eradicator because this, see this little bit up here, and then there's a little bit of a highlight that comes. So I've got a damp brush, and then kitchen roll and tap it. Okay.
Nigel's on his way.
Oh, is he? Give me a shout. Oh, see, I'll hear them when they come in. Okay. Now, it's that to me is not looking quite right. This edge still looks a bit rough. So what I'm going to... I'll soften that in.
Oh, sorry.
Soften that there. And what I might have to do is put a little bit of so let me lighten all that side there. Okay, and then that's better. And then just add a little bit more of the darker there. But it just needs to have a soft faded edge rather than a... Just tap it there like that, and then that's the bit that comes off there. And also we have some bits that come out there a little bit, so there. Okay, so we'll leave that. So the final bit of the eye, what we're going to do is I'm going to mix up some, we're going to mix some of this, the around the eye colour there. We've got some red around the eye. Now it's a reddy orange, it's not a red, it's got a reddy orange. So what I've done is I've mixed a little bit of Windsor red. So let me clean the brush is looking a bit mucky. So I've got some Windsor red and some transparent orange, because it is an orange, but it's a reddy orange, and then a little bit of the permanent red as well. Okay. There. Right. So what I'm going to do is my brush, and again we're going to so look very carefully at your reference of where the water is going to be. Okay, so see, it comes round there, just up there, and it goes right up into there. Pull it round here. Excuse me. And then it comes out and down here. It goes underneath the eye. Okay. So make sure you get the water everywhere where you need it. Don't come out too far. So it comes around there. Now on this edge, because it's sort of skin and it's going into the white feathers, we want it sort of having a bit of a jagged edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a thin layer on first and then build it up, because it has got some darker undertones sort of underneath. Here is going to be darker. So that goes right up to that bit there. Then it comes just down the side of that part of the eye there. In here. So just be careful, you put it in the middle and then you can pull it to where you need it to go. It comes down there like that. So that's showing us roughly where. That's it, goes right up there. And it comes around there. Okay? So that's the first layer, so that's the base layer basically. And then I'm just looking now, as this is all starting to dry, I'm just going to look and I'm just going to sort of tap in a bit more of this dark here. The pupil and down around the outside of this eye. There we go. And then I'm just going to put a little bit of, just want to brighten this little bit up here, a little bit outside. There we go. So you can see there the brown in the eye. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take some of that red. I'm going to put another layer on, but this time I'm just going to put it on dry and go basically where so pitch that round. So I've got this nice bright colour now. Okay, and it comes around here, and then comes down here. And that bit is there, so that's a nice, but what I'm going to do on the edge is we're just going to sort of dot it and jagger it a little bit because of the white feathers that come in over the top. We don't want it to look like a perfectly straight line, so we'll just do that. Okay. So there are, looking at that, we've got some shadows on there. So all I'm going to do is get a little bit of this bluey grey, the lighter one, and I'm going to mix it with some of this, the red that we've mixed. So you get, so put that in another well. So we get this sort of grey orange colour. Okay. So it's like a browny, grey brown, basically. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put that, I can notice there's a few bits up here where it's a bit darker. So while it's still damp, we can tap it in and it should still soften in itself. Up there it's darker. In this corner here we've got a bit of shadow. And then also around here. That. So you can see we've got some little bits of shadow area there as well. There you go. So what I'm going to do now is leave that to dry, and that's the first section done. So we've done the eye, so next we're going to look at the beak, and I call it the hinge. It's where the mouth here, that's there, and it opens like an hinge. So that it can get this amount of fish into its beak, so it can fly back home and feed its young. Right, well, thank you for watching the first part, and I'll get on to doing the second part. And I do apologise for any background noise, because as I say, we've had the builders in, so across the road there, they're building some new houses. Okay, so I'll see you in part 2. Thank you very much.